How old is humanity? It sounds like a simple question. You expect a simple answer. A number. Like asking how old a tree is. You count the rings and you're done. But with humanity, it's not like that at all. The real answer is it depends on what you mean by human. That's not a cop out. It's the heart of the problem. Are you asking about the first creature that stood on two legs and started down our path? Are you asking about the first one, clever enough to make a stone tool? Or are you asking about us, Homo sapiens, with our big brains and our funny, flat faces? Or maybe you mean something else. Maybe you mean the moment we started acting human. The moment we started painting on cave walls, telling stories, and burying our dead with flowers. Each of these is a different starting point. Each gives you a different age. And each tells a part of a much bigger, much stranger story. A story that stretches back millions of years. A story that's still being pieced together from fragments of bone and stone found in the dust. So, to find the answer, we have to go back, way back, and we have to look at all the different moments that could be called the beginning. The first place to look is the Great Split, the moment our story separated from the story of our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees. We share a lot with them. Our DNA is incredibly similar, but obviously we are very different. Something happened a long time ago that sent our ancestors down one path and their ancestors down another. This split didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a single event. It was a slow, messy divorce that took place over 1,000,000 years or more. Scientists look at the molecular clock, which uses the rate of genetic mutations to estimate when two species diverged. Based on that, the split happened somewhere between 6 and 8 million years ago. So is humanity 8 million years old? Well, no. The creature that lived back then was not human. It wasn't a chimpanzee either. It was something else. A common ancestor to both of us. We don't have a perfect fossil of this creature. We probably never will. Fossils are rare. But we have some clues. In Central Africa, scientists found a skull called Sahelanthropus chidensis. They nicknamed it Tumai. It's about 7 million years old. It has a chimp-sized brain and a heavy brow ridge. But the hole at the base of the skull, where the spinal cord connects, is positioned underneath. Not at the back, like an ape that walks on all fours. This suggests Tumai might have held its head upright. It might have walked on two legs. Walking on two legs, or bipedalism, is the first major thing that set our lineage apart. It's a huge deal. Think about it. Suddenly, your hands are free. You can carry food. You can carry tools. You can carry your kids. You can see over the tall savanna grass, looking for predators or looking for lunch. It was a fundamental change in how to live. These early creatures are called hominins. That's the family that includes us and all our extinct relatives after the split from chimps. For millions of years, there were different kinds of hominins walking around Africa. There was Orin, there was Ardipithecus, or Artie, who had feet that could both grasp branches and walk upright. They were a mix of old and new. They were apes that were trying out a new way of walking. But they weren't human. Their brains were small. They were probably still spending a lot of time in the trees. So if you say humanity is 6 or 7 million years old, you're really talking about the age of our family trees first, tentative step away from the other apes. It's the beginning of our lineage. But it's not the beginning of humanity. Not yet. Let's jump forward a few million years. The world is changing. Africa is getting drier. The forests are shrinking and the grasslands are spreading. Walking upright is becoming a really good strategy. And now we meet a new group of hominins, the Australopithecines. This is a name you might have heard. The most famous one is Lucy. She was an Australopithecus afarensis, and her skeleton, found in Ethiopia in 1974, was a revelation. She lived about 3.2 million years ago. She was small, only about 3.5 feet tall. She had long arms and a small ape-sized brain, but her pelvis and leg bones were clear. She walked upright. She wasn't just experimenting with it. It was her primary way of getting around. For a long time, we thought of creatures like Lucy as a direct ancestor. A straight line from her to us. But the picture is more complicated. There were many different species of Australopithecines. Some were slender, like Lucy. Others were robust, with huge jaws and massive chewing muscles for grinding tough plants. Or they were like different experiments in how to be a bipedal ape, but were they human? They walked like us, in a way. But their brains were still small. They were smart, probably as smart as a modern chimpanzee. But they weren't thinking like we do. Or were they? This is where things get interesting. Around 3.3 million years ago, someone started making stone tools. We found them in Kenya. They are very simple, just big, clumsy rocks that were smashed against other rocks to create a sharp edge. It's called the Lemequian tool industry. It's the oldest one we've found so far. Who made them, we don't know for sure. It might have been one of the Australopithecines. This was a shock to many scientists. We used to think that tool making was unique to our own genus, Homo. It was part of the definition of being human, but maybe it started earlier. Maybe the first step towards technology wasn't taken by someone we would call human at all. Then, around 2.8 million years ago, we see something new in the fossil record. A jawbone found in Ethiopia. It looks different from the Australopithecines. It's more slender, more like us. This is the earliest known fossil of our own genus, the genus Homo. And soon after, we meet the first species in our genus to get a name, Homo habilis, which means handyman. They were given this name because they were found with a different, slightly more advanced set of stone tools, the old Darwin tools. These weren't just bashed rocks, they were flakes, intentionally struck from a core rock to create a sharp, precise cutting edge. They were used for butchering animals, for scraping meat off bones, and for cracking bones open to get at the rich marrow inside. This is a major turning point. Homo habilis had a bigger brain than Lucy. Not huge, but bigger. Making a tool, even a simple one, requires planning. You have to find the right kind of rock. You have to know how to hit it to get the flake you want. And you have to remember how to do it again next time. This process of tool use and brain growth probably fueled each other. Better tools meant more high-energy food like meat and marrow. More energy meant you could support a bigger, more expensive brain. A bigger brain meant you could make even better tools. It was a feedback loop. So, is this the start of humanity? Is humanity about 2.8 million years old? This is a really strong argument. The appearance of our own genus Homo, the consistent, skillful creation of tools. A diet that included more meat, a bigger brain. It feels like we're getting closer. We're looking at something that is recognizably the beginning of our own story. But Homo habilis was still not like us. They were small, they had long arms and short legs, a bit like an ape. They probably couldn't run long distances, they were still tied to the trees for safety. They were a bridge between the older ape, like hominins, and the more human, like ones to come. They were a first draft of humanity. Then comes the next big step, and this one is a giant. Around 2 million years ago, a new kind of hominin appears on the scene. Homo erectus, the upright man. These guys were different. They were tall, they had long legs and short arms. Their body proportions were much more like ours. They were built for walking and running long distances out on the open savanna. Their brains were much bigger than habilis. Not as big as ours, but getting there. If you saw one from a distance, dressed in modern clothes, you might not look twice. And Homo erectus did something no hominin had ever done before. They left Africa. This is a staggering achievement. For millions of years, the entire story of our evolution had played out on one continent. But Homo erectus spread out. They walked into the Middle East. They went all the way to China and Indonesia. They reached parts of Europe. They were the first true global pioneers of our family. How did they do it? They had better technology. They created a new kind of tool, the Acheulean hand axe. Unlike the simple old dough and flakes, these were large teardrop-shaped tools. They were worked on both sides. They were symmetrical. To make one, you had to have a mental template in your mind of what you wanted to create. It shows a new level of planning and foresight, and even more important, Homo erectus probably controlled fire. We find evidence of hearths, of burned animal bones, at sites they occupied. Fire changes everything. It provides warmth, allowing you to live in colder climates. It keeps predators away at night, and it lets you cook your food. Cooking makes food easier to digest and releases more nutrients. It kills parasites, it detoxifies some plants. It was another huge boost for brain development. A cooked meal provides more energy with less digestive effort. Homo erectus was incredibly successful. They were around for a very, very long time. They first appeared almost 2 million years ago, and some populations may have survived until as recently as 100,000 years ago. That's an astonishing run. Our own species has only been around for a fraction of that time. So, is this the beginning of humanity? When our ancestors stood up tall, mastered fire, built sophisticated tools, and walked out of Africa to explore the world. It's a very compelling case. In Homo erectus, we see the blueprint for much of what we consider human. We see intelligence, adaptability, and a relentless curiosity to see what's over the next hill. It's hard not to look at them and see a reflection of ourselves, but the story gets even more complex. The world of 500,000 years ago wasn't empty. Homo erectus had given rise to new species in different parts of the world. In Europe and the Middle East, a group evolved that we know very well, the Neanderthals. Neanderthals have a bad reputation. We think of them as brutish, club-wielding cavemen. That picture is completely wrong. It's a prejudice that goes back to the very first time their bones were studied. But now we know better. Neanderthals were incredibly sophisticated. Their brains were, on average, slightly larger than ours today. They were powerfully built, adapted to the cold climates of Ice Age Europe. They were expert hunters, taking down huge animals like mammoths and woolly rhinos. Their toolkit, the Mousterian, was a step up from the hand axe. It involved preparing a stone core and then striking off a perfect flake or point. This requires even more skill and planning, but it was more than just tools. Neanderthals buried their dead. At a site in Iraq called Shanidar Cave, a Neanderthal was buried on a bed of flowers. We know this because of the pollen found in the soil around a skeleton. This suggests they had some concept of ritual, of ceremony. Maybe even a belief in an afterlife. They cared for their sick and old. We found skeletons of older Neanderthals with healed injuries like broken bones or blindness. These individuals couldn't have survived for years without help from their group. That shows compassion. It shows a complex social bond. They might have made art. In Spain, we've found seashells with holes drilled in them and pigments that suggest they were worn as jewelry. We've found abstract engravings on a cave wall that are much older than any art made by our own species in Europe. They were not grunting brutes. They were a different kind of human. At the same time, over in Asia, there was another group, the Denisovans. We know much less about them. For a long time, all we had was a tiny finger bone and a couple of teeth from a cave in Siberia. But we could get DNA from that bone. And it told us they were a distinct lineage, separate from both Neanderthals and us. They were another branch of the human family tree. So picture the world about 100,000 years ago. It's not a world with one kind of human. It's a world with at least three. There are Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia. There are Denisovans in Eastern Asia. And in Africa, the final piece of the puzzle is emerging. Us. Homo sapiens. This is where we get to the most direct answer to the question. How old is our species? The latest evidence points to a beginning around 300,000 years ago. The crucial fossils come from a site in Morocco called Jebel Irhoud. They found skulls there that have a mix of features. The face is very modern, it's flat and tucked under the brain case just like ours. But the brain case itself is longer and lower than ours. It's not quite the same shape. These fossils show that our species didn't just pop into existence fully formed. We evolved piece by piece. The modern face came first. The modern globular brain shape came later. But these were people we would classify as Homo sapiens. They were the earliest members of our own species. So, is 300,000 years the answer? The age of our species. This is the answer a biologist or a paleoanthropologist would probably give you. It's the age of our hardware, the age of our bodies, when a creature that looked more or less like us first walked the earth in Africa. For a long time, those early Homo sapiens in Africa made tools that were very similar to the ones the Neanderthals were making. They were smart, they were successful, they started to spread across Africa, but they weren't acting quite like we do. Something was still missing. And then somewhere around 70,000 to 50,000 years ago, something incredible happened. It's sometimes called the Great Leap Forward or the Cognitive Revolution. We start to see a flowering of culture and innovation that is completely new. This is when we see the first unambiguous art, the stunning cave paintings of animals in France and Spain, the carved statuettes like the Venus figurines. We see elaborate burials with bodies covered in red ochre and decorated with thousands of shell beads. We see bone tools, needles for sewing clothes, spear throwers for hunting more effectively, and even musical instruments like a flute made from a vulture's bone. This wasn't just a change in technology, it seems to have been a change in the way we think. We started using symbols. A painting of a bison isn't just a picture, it represents the idea of a bison. A bead necklace isn't just decoration, it communicates something about who you are, what group you belong to. It's social information. This is arguably the birth of modern human consciousness. It's when we started to create a world of myth, of religion, of shared stories. This ability to cooperate flexibly in large groups, all believing in the same fictions, is what sets us apart. You know, it's what allowed us to build cities, nations, empires, what caused this change. We don't know for sure. Maybe it was a small genetic mutation in the brain that rewired our language abilities. Maybe it wasn't a sudden event at all, but a slow accumulation of cultural knowledge that finally reached a tipping point. But whatever the cause, its effect was profound. Armed with this new cognitive toolkit, Homo sapiens exploded out of Africa around 60,000 years ago. And this time, it was different. We weren't just another hominin species, we were something new. We spread across the globe with breathtaking speed. We reached Australia by 50,000 years ago, which required crossing open water. We pushed into the frozen north of Siberia. We eventually crossed the Bering Strait into the Americas. And wherever we went, the other humans disappeared. Within a few thousand years of our arrival in Europe, the Neanderthals were gone. The Denisovans in Asia vanished too. We don't know if we killed them, or outcompeted them for resources, or if we just absorbed them into our population. We know that we did interbreed with them. Most people today with ancestry outside of Africa carry a small amount of Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. Some people in Asia and Oceania carry Denisovan DNA as well, so their story hasn't completely ended. A small part of them lives on in us, but as distinct species, they were gone. By about 40,000 years ago, for the first time in millions of years, there was only one kind of human left on planet Earth, us. So, where does that leave us? What's the real answer to the question? You can see now why there isn't one. There are several answers, and they all have merit. You could say humanity is about 7 million years old. That's the age of our lineage, the moment our ancestors took the first step on two legs and began a journey separate from the apes. You could say humanity is about 2.8 million years old. That's the age of our genus, Homo. The moment a creature with a bigger brain started to consistently craft stone tools to make a living. You could say humanity is about 2 million years old. That's when Homo erectus appeared, with a body much like our own, and began to use fire and explore the entire planet. You could say humanity is 300,000 years old. That's the age of our species, Homo sapiens. The moment a creature with a body and a brain shaped like ours first appeared in Africa. Or you could say humanity is about 50,000 years old. That's when our modern behavior kicked in. When we started painting, creating, and thinking symbolically. When we truly became the cultural creatures we are today. Which one is right? None of them. And all of them. The story of humanity isn't a single event. It's a long, slow process. It's a rambling, branching tree, not a straight line. There were dead ends and side branches. There were times when our existence was incredibly precarious, when we were just one of several human types struggling to survive. The question itself is, what's important? It forces us to look back at this immense, deep history. It forces us to confront how we got here, and it forces us to define what exactly we think it means to be human. Is it our legs? Is it our hands? Is it our brains? Or is it our stories? The answer is probably all of the above. We are the sum of this entire epic journey.